Hello, everybody. We're thrilled to be here today to talk about capturing the value of investment for technology spending. My name is Frankie Jackson, and I'll be facilitating our webinar today, and I'm serving as a subject matter expert for CoSN. The real stars of the show, we have three highly esteemed professionals in our field. I can't think of anybody that brings so much value and so much professionalism to our field in EdTech leadership. We have William Pierce. He's our Executive Administrator of Digital Innovation and Program Management from Jefferson County School District. We also have Diane Dorsch from, she is a retired Chief Technology Officer, but she's currently serving as a Technical Project Director for Digital Promise. And then we have Rob Dixon as a Chief Information Officer from Wichita Public Schools. Myself, I served as a Chief Technology Officer for 25 years and made a career transition in 2019, where I'm now serving at the state and national levels, and that state would be Texas. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot of great information. These are our subjects that we'll be covering today, and as each of our panelists present their specific area, they will introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background. I'm going to be talking about the process. This is the hard work. And so there's quite a few slides, but we wanted to leave you with some information that you could actually take back and start to work on this capturing of VOI. And then William Pierce is going to talk about, from his perspective, identification to evaluation. And then Diane's got some great information where she's going to show you a template and so that you can show the value of your investments. And then Rob Dixon is going to end in building the right story for your why. So I'd like to say all of these are my favorite topics, but they're all worthwhile, and I know you're really, really going to enjoy them. So let's just jump right on into it. So think about if you worked in any other field other than K-12. So our EdTech leaders, we work in a different type of a field, serving students, serving teachers and administrators, and it's a field that is, I think, a little bit more challenging. And so any investment that we would make if we were in the business sector would really be grounded on verifiable methods. So if we took to our board or to our executive leadership team, there would be a heavy emphasis on the cost and then on the value with specific benefits. And that would be highly scrutinized before anything would be approved. Now, that doesn't mean that we as EdTech leaders don't do the same, because we do. Serving in those long, hard 25 years as a CTO, there were, going through 5 or 6 huge technology bonds and making numerous board presentations. We always had to present of benefits. But I think our challenge today, what we're talking about today, is we make far more impactful decisions. We're making decisions about the future of our children. And sometimes it's more difficult to measure value. So for example, how do you really measure value in, say, student engagement or what their interest is in STEAM? And then how do we really prove quantitatively or even behaviorally what the benefits are? How do you measure things like competence or soft skills? Some of those things are more difficult to get your arms around and to quantify those type of benefits. So think about problem solving skills and even communication and confidence and collaboration. Really finding measures and key performance indicators around those, I think, are more challenging. And then there is, measuring digital equality. There's neighborhoods in every one of our school systems. We're all trying to work to bring digital equity into our neighborhoods, into our homes, including devices. And when we really look at how we measure digital equity, I think there is a difference. There's a difference in equality. What does that really mean? Does that mean every student in their home has a one-to-one device? They have the same opportunities and resources that are equal, versus equity is recognizing that students have different needs. They have different circumstances, and it may be that the allocation of resources and opportunities really need to be looked at in terms of what our intended outcome is. And then the bigger question is, how do we sustain digital equity over time in the years to come? All of these play into this value of investment. So what is the process? I think there's a lot of questions centered around it, and I think it's very difficult to really express. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about for the remainder of my part of the presentation. If we look at value of investment, you may want to just think of that as it's just a task. It's a task of analyzing the anticipated costs and what the related benefits are of technology projects. We're all seasoned leaders. Some of you may be aspiring ed tech leaders, but anytime there's a funding or purchase, these are the kinds of benefits and cost analysis that need to be taking place. So if we really look at VOI benefits, what does that really include? And what are you really going to need to capture? There's dollar savings, there's efficiencies, there's also maybe even revenue generation. But it's these qualitative benefits that directly relate to how the school system is going to meet their mission, their goals, and maybe even some of the mandates that we're really going to go through and articulate very, very well. One tip that I'd like to say, and for you to be thinking about throughout all the presentations, is that qualitative benefits are really about giving heartfelt, impactful, emotional examples. So anytime you can dig really deep and find those kinds of examples, I think that makes the process easier. So it's just a process. What is this analysis? I think it becomes somewhat overwhelming when we look at it, because it also includes the processes of total cost of ownership and also being able to quantify any return on investment. So what we've done is we've made it really easy. We've boiled it down into 5 steps. Some of you may remember back in the 2014-15 time period, CoSN had a huge initiative called Smart IT. And that was a worthwhile project, and it's still alive and well today. But you know, when you look at this decision matrix and the process, it can be overwhelming. So these 5 steps are steps that I think any of us can really hone in on and really get our arms around what this capturing process is. So I'm going to walk through all 5 steps, and I'm going to do it pretty quickly. And the beauty is you'll have this presentation and you can use it and maybe study it at a more low level detail. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to present today. And we have time for questions. So the first thing is to really capture this total cost of ownership. And that is to account for everything. That's the initial purchases, that's the subscriptions, it's all the direct and indirect costs that, for example, professional development, support costs, any cost that's associated with your project. You'll want to be able to capture that. And it's also all of the anticipated cost over the life of the project. So I think our boards of educations, a lot of times they want to see at least a 3 or 5 year total cost of ownership for a project. Step 2 is really capturing and calculating this return on investment. So that might be related to anticipated cost save. It could be any kind of cost avoidance or savings in dollars. And I think these are fairly easy to get your arms around in terms of how you calculate that. I think it's when you get into these efficiencies that are gained, when you have to put time associated with this calculation, it gets, I think, a little bit more complicated. But, you know, think about some things like, will your annual budgets be reduced over time? Maybe not in the first year, but maybe in the second or third year. And will your productivity be improved? Are you going to be able to avoid future costs? If you spend this money now, you'll be able to save money in the next 2 years. So the overall savings is a large return on your investment. And then step number 3 is really the hard part. It's measuring those qualitative benefits. And I think there's a huge benefit if you really always think about what the strategic goals are that will be positively affected by the project. So you can't go wrong if it is that you go back to your strategic goals and say, how am I going to increase student learning, student confidence, problem solving? Go back to those and bring those into the process. It may be that you find a way to assign a relative level of importance to help prioritize these investments, especially if you've got multiple projects that are competing for funding. And then, of course, align those benefits, those anticipated benefits, back to your strategic plan, back to your objectives, and your goals in measurable terms if possible. But don't let that be something that stops you from moving forward. Sometimes I know for me, I get bogged down in the details. Keep moving forward, do the best that you can. It's not an exact science, it's almost an art. So some of the measures might be evidence of progress. It could be some key performance indicators that you have. It could be some specific action steps. It could be impactful success stories. It could be explanation of value statements. And we're going to be talking about some success stories. And then, be sure and get every line of the resources and the needs that you'll need to attach to those benefits, because that's really what you're trying to do. We're trying to capture the overall cost so that we can paint a clear picture of what it is that we're asking for and how much it's going to cost. Step 4 is, always those project risks. Sometimes this is just your best gut feeling, your best intrinsic guess about the probability of success. You have to think about that. There's always the political climate. Those are the things that get in the way. Safety, security. There's a lot of different factors, but think about the project risk. And then the fun part is building that case for planning and purchasing the technology project. And I like to think of this as, that week or two before you've got a big presentation to the board or to your executive team, leadership team, and going through that process of how you're going to, I hate to use the word sell, but how you're going to present the project so that you can gain buy-in. So, think about this VOI and calculation we've talked about a lot, but sometimes as technology leaders, we like a calculation. We like to think that A plus B equals C. That's not the case in VOI. Sometimes A plus B just doesn't equal C. So maybe it's really all about how we tell the story and use the results from the VOI analysis. These are all things that we need to be doing anyway as leaders. So this is the last slide that I have. Here's some quick ideas about how this VOI analysis can be used. And I think there's a lot of huge benefits just going through the process. Number one, you're going through the process and at the same time, you're building your presentation to convince your stakeholders. Maybe it's your executive team again, maybe it's your boards of trustees. You're working to convince them to invest in the technology project. It may be used to help drill down on what the real priorities are for funding a project, and really getting into the details of the budgeting process. What's the cost and what's the value? You've got to balance those two things. Then it's just a good practice to document. You're articulating the purpose of the project. You're getting it down to more detail level. It's things that you need to be doing anyway. And then there's the sustainability of what it's going to take to really refresh and to support the project ongoing over the long haul. So with that, I'm going to check the time, see how perfect. We are going to move into our presentations where we're really going to speak about some great examples. And I think our first presenter up is William Pierce, and he's going to be speaking from identification to evaluation. So William, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Frankie. As you saw, my name is William Pierce. I'm the Executive Administrator of Digital Innovation and Program Management at Jefferson County Public Schools in Louisville, Kentucky. Just to give you a quick background, we have about 100,000 students in our district, with about 15% English language learners and 15% special education students within those groups. So we're a larger district, but we've got some similarities with smaller ones as well. So when we talk about VOI, it's certainly going to be that process, just as you outlined, and basically how do we take an idea and transfer it into practice, and then that kind of constant reevaluation. Obviously, most of us are from an educational background and understand that, reteaching and evaluation and reteaching are all part of this process. And that's exactly what this is, just in a little bit different way. So when we first come to think of VOI and any type of project or idea, we have to define what that is and understanding your why. And that ties in directly to your total cost of ownership, as Frankie, you spoke to. And from the beginning, that's going to be your perceived cost of ownership, because you don't really know what it's going to take. So in doing so, you have to determine, okay, where are we now versus where are we going in the future? And I apologize. My son is at home with me and is currently trying to break down the door. So
okay.
The point in that is there is no magic bullet within this. And, you know, technology is never going to be a magic bullet. You can't just hand a bunch of people technology and expect improvement. So we really have to look at what are the infrastructures that are required for that success. And all of that plays into that total cost of ownership, from this human capital to financial capital and everything there within. The next step, obviously, is the implementation. And that part's relatively simple. And I know that both 1 and 2 there, Rob is going to go into a little bit further here in a moment, is understanding your why and really how to implement successfully. But that's where we're going to put that action into practice and really get it to our students, keeping in mind that they are our end goal. We can do fantastic things in the district, but unless it positively impacts students, it really doesn't matter. So after that implementation, we have to examine what we've done. And this is where, Frankie, you were talking about, as we begin to look at that return on investment and those qualitative and quantitative benefits. So what are the outcomes and how are we measuring that? From a hardware perspective, many of our schools, obviously, with the increase in federal funding, have taken great steps to one-to-one investments, and in partnerships like Verizon Innovative Learning have been able to do so. So how do we balance that out between what are we doing and what is the impact that that's having on students? For example, in Jefferson County, when we first went to virtual learning in March of 2020, we had roughly only 2,000 live learning sessions over a 2-week period. Since we've put in our investment and we have officially gone one-to-one across our entire district in a similar 2-week period just a couple of weeks ago, where we had an immediate shift, we had almost 4 million live sessions of learning. That means students are able to actually engage with a teacher from a distance, and right away, that is your quantitative data, but obviously that also speaks to a lot of the qualitative data, because we know that there can be a discussion in learning rather than simply students working asynchronously. From a software purchase or a software side, you know, how do you justify your purchases? Are you looking at, are those softwares being used and what are their overall impacts? How does it tie into what is going on and in its relation to your district initiatives? If you're working to address racial equity, are you seeing the achievement gap diminished? If you are focusing on, obviously, student achievement, is that showing an increase on formative and summative assessments across? And can that really be beneficial there? And then obviously, as I said earlier, the whole part of this is, what is the true impact on students? What is their impact on achievements? If you don't see an improvement for students, that's probably where that priority discussion comes in. Because if there is no positive impact to students, it probably shouldn't be a priority at all, as we have to focus on our students first. And then lastly, and I know Diane will speak to this in just a moment as well, but after you've got that data, what do you do with it? Obviously, we need to be refocusing and improving and keeping an eye on sustainability. So at that time, we actually have the reality of our cost of ownership. For example, we understood very quickly that when we purchased 100,000 Chromebooks for our district, we did not have the internal supports to maintain 100,000 Chromebooks when they break. So we've had to explore outside options of support and things like that. And that was not something that we had initially budgeted for, as we believed our team could kind of keep up. And then you get the other aspects of digital citizenship, device care, all of those kind of wraparound things that have to work within this. Again, knowing that technology is not going to be that magic bullet. And then, as Frankie, as you said, build for technology, building that plan. So you're avoiding any back steps and stagnation. Effectively, in education, if you're stopping, you're falling behind. We have to keep pushing forward. We have to stay on that front edge. Historic thoughts of education are already outdated. So we have to stay moving and refocusing what we're doing. And a lot of that comes from shifting finances and decreasing the waste. Any project is always going to have waste. So what can we do to mitigate that and ensure that we improve and grow upon the successes? And I've previously said, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Sometimes that's hard for districts as that prioritization takes place. And it does almost become a competition between one project versus another. And that's where your district has to look very honestly at what we're doing and what is that value of investment that we see. Which one offers the more improvement and success to our district overall and to our students? And obviously there at the end, establishing a system for sustainability. What does that look like as you take those next steps to ensure that it can be successful this year into next and beyond? And I know Diane is going to speak to that here in just a moment. So thank you.
William, can I ask, I think we have time. Can I ask you just a question that I think
certainly
might be interesting to our audience? When we go back to that step number 3, examine measuring impact. Mm-hmm. What did you find was the most difficult qualitative benefit to measure? So for example, when I think about Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, it's really hard to dig really deep and get into collaboration and confidence. What's your best thought on how to really measure that?
Well, qualitative is always much more difficult than quantitative. We can always pull numbers out of the back and whatever else. But that qualitative is really the person side of investments. And that is very difficult to correlate. So when you think about that, sharing success stories, that's a big thing. And then how do they kind of bolster what we call your elevator speech? Mm-hmm. When you've got 2 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever it might be with somebody, and you need to sell them that, as you said earlier, it's effectively a sales pitch. I can present all types of data, but if I tell them about William, who never had internet before in his household, and now JCPS or Verizon Innovative Learning or whatever entity has been able to afford that to them, that is life-changing for them. And especially when we start talking about the digital divide and the historic and future implications of that divide, we know that we're really making a change for those students, not only today, but in their future as well.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And again, do you think that, as you're building your story, building your presentation and going through this process of putting all of this thought into action, do you think there's an advantage of thinking in advance proactively about what kinds of stories you're going to be gathering, so that when you do make your presentation, you go out and you visit with teachers, you visit with students, and say, these would be some of the benefits of how this initiative, this proposed technology project could bring transformation in student lives? Or do you think about all of that before, and maybe just talk a bit about how you've been successful at that?
No, most certainly. And one of the biggest things in all of this, and what's honestly missing from this, is stakeholder input. From step one, you really need to have the collective community buy into this, or at least information, and opening those feedback loops with them so that you can not only hear things at the end, but hear things throughout into how this is going. And then using that information to kind of target your audience, hearing something from an IT person and saying, oh, rolling out Chromebooks was fantastic means one thing, but hearing it from an 8-year-old who's, like I said, got the device at home for the first time ever, that's vastly more impactful. As the students smile and everything else, you just see them light up, and that's really what sells a true value investment. And that's that qualitative impact that is very, very difficult to kind of put in a box, if you will, as it's much more ambiguous, but it is much, much more impactful when you can find ways to capture that information.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll have time to come back and because I have a couple more questions, but want to make sure we hear from our other two presenters. So let's move on. And it's Diane's birthday today. So this is how committed she is. She's not told us how old she is, but I'll turn it over to you, Diane, and we'll look forward to hearing your presentation about show the value of your investments.
Well, thank you so much, Frankie. And you know what, it is kind of an honor to be able to present with all of these fine people on my birthday. You know, I have worked with William and Rob now within the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools project for quite a few years, and it's been really cool to see how they've been able to evolve their school districts and also kind of carry through some of the practices and systems they created in VILS, which is Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, VILS into other schools within their district. These two have been great at telling the story of technology. They both participated and support even other VILS schools through their presentations because they've got a lot of best practices to share. I am a former classroom teacher, director of technology, and chief technology and information officer. I now serve in the Verizon project. And I have to say, if you haven't heard of VILS, Verizon has devoted enough funding to provide LTE enabled Chromebooks, iPads, or hotspots to under-resourced schools. And so we are now currently on cohort 9. And so you can tell how many years we've been doing this. And, this is something that we've really been able to see best practices come through. And the two presenters today, are great at really sharing those practices. Just cannot give them enough credit for the things they've done. One thing that I want to point out is that we do have a sustainability toolkit. As a former chief technology and information officer, I think it's absolutely wonderful, that funding is coming through, relief funding, and that's always a good thing, but maybe a good thing like a puppy, right? In that you get a lot of really cool stuff with the money that comes through, but then you realize that you have to take care of that puppy and your funding has gone away. It's the same thing for technology. And so the sustainability toolkit does talk about all those acronyms that Frankie talked about, TCO, ROI, VOI, all those things. And I just point it out because I do believe it can be helpful to you, probably in your planning now, because in a few years, that extra funding is going to go away. You should be thinking about that right now. Another example that I want to bring forward about quantifying scalable practices are a few things that we talk about and have our school districts in VILS do. One of them is the student technology team. And, both William and Rob have great stories about how technology teams have made a difference. They've told the qualitative stories about how a student, who might not be the greatest communicator, but great at technology, really learns how to build their customer service skills and works as a support to students and teachers as they help with repairs or level 1 troubleshooting. Those are all those really great qualitative stories. But you know what? You can also show your money savings on that. And that's what the value of investment is. And the cool part is, that again, I know that, student tech teams might start in VILS schools, but we might see similar tech teams in other schools that aren't VILS. And why is that, you might say? Well, you know what? If you have a student tech team, those teams could actually alleviate a lot of the work that your building or site or district technician does within your building regarding level 1 things, resetting passwords, troubleshooting things, helping with, very easy break fix things. I have heard time and time again how students on the tech team have helped take care of that in a timely manner for both students and teachers. And that has saved a lot of time and money as well in what you would pay a site-based technician. You could actually show a monetary value of that. And those are the types of things, like William said, we can pull out numbers I think that's a really good number to be able to show, is that, you know, not only are we helping get students ready for the future, and some of these students may find that they want to have a career in technology because of it, but we are also providing a service to schools and taking the load off someone who we pay, you know, to do that work. And I know Rob even has arranged so that they can pay students at the high school level to do these things. So I want to give that as an example of a scalable practice that actually can show not only the qualitative, but also the quantitative gains in what you're doing for the future. And also showing cost avoidance. If you took money right now, reallocated maybe some of the money that you would put into purchasing hardware and bought maybe some software that helped provide analytics for you on, let's say, the apps that are used or how many logins take place within your school district in a day, you can start gathering data and build a baseline for expectations of what you expect good learning and a good day of learning to look like digitally. When your time comes, when that extra funding is not there, you can use that data, pull it back and say, look, this is what we expect. We expect this many logins. We expect these apps are going to be used. We need to have funding for it. And then if you keep those stats in front of your people right now, as you get closer to that funding cliff where your money is going away, okay, hopefully you have proven the value of the investment so that you can continue. And so having that data and starting those data points right now is going to be helpful. Also, looking at that data when you finally have to do those really painful cuts, you will have data in the background to help reinforce your decisions. And so again, starting to collect data now is really important. And that's something, as I do workshops on sustainability, that's one of the first things that our participants say, gosh, I need to start collecting data now. And so I want to put that out for you as well, because you know what, monetarily, you can show cost avoidance by saying, you know, we see that these apps aren't being used and we know that we can cut them and, you know, we're going to have to avoid that cost. Another thing, and that's what you have the QR code for, another thing about the qualitative value of investment is something that we have started new within the VILS project this year, in that we have our school districts and our schools build a portfolio to talk about their journey in the one-on-one, what support looks like, what student learning looks like, what are your gains, where's your growth, and all those types of things. And so the QR code I have here is to that template, but you know what? You not only get the template because Rob has some real life examples for you as well. So in conclusion, being part of VILS has helped us see and isolate, you know, some really good value of investment strategies. And so hopefully today me sharing a few of them is going to be helpful. I see that the link doesn't work. I will work on getting that fixed. Now I'd like to hand off to Rob Dixon.
And before we do that, Diane, just, you know, thinking about the third bullet there, documenting and communicating the qualitative wins. What are some of the very best wins? I love the fact that you talked about the tech team that's, you know, serving in leadership, trying to figure out how to service all the needs when you can pull in students to help, you know, to mentor them and help them be part of your team is huge. Is there any impactful stories, maybe one that you could share that comes to mind that
Certainly.
you've seen, Bills?
I'm going to give one from the PL side, one from the IT side. In professional learning, and it does impact IT as well, is one of the things that we request that all schools do before students get devices is go through you know, some digital citizenship instruction. And we have really seen school districts take off on this and build complete programs around it. And it's not just at the beginning before kids get devices, but it's all the way through. And so we have heard great success stories of how, you know, this might take place once a month within first hour. And, you know, even things like once we got this digital citizen instruction through to our students regarding the right way to handle devices, device breakage went down. So, you know, it is the digital citizenship piece that has been so successful in school districts that we have seen the Ville schools programs go into other schools within the district, and it become more district wide. So again, digital citizenship is not just the library media specialist job or the classroom teacher's job or the IT person's job, it's everybody's job. And so making that everybody, you know, making everyone aware, that is key. From the IT side, we request that schools are very clear on the repair process of devices. We even suggest, hey, have a sign up in every classroom so kids know what to do if their device is broken. And again, we've seen flow charts. We've heard about processes. Sometimes it's taken care of at the building. Sometimes, you know, the district takes things and then they get sent off for device repair. But we have really seen that having a standardized process is a key to success, and everyone knows what to do. Everyone knows what their role is. And we have seen that process go to other non-Ville schools as well. So those are two winners. And I see Rob and William's heads nod as I say that. I think they would agree. Those might be two of the big ones that have created success in the program.
Wow. And I really like how you talked about the pre, so that you can come back and do a post analysis, you know, before students get their devices. So it takes some forethought in how you're going to be able to collect these qualitative benefits. Well, let's not run out of time, and let's move on to Rob, and we cannot wait to hear from you, Rob. So take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Frankie, Diane. William, you did a great job of talking about going through the technical aspects. I think, you know, for me, we're going to talk about kind of how things have changed. I am Chief Information Officer for Wichita Public Schools. Whenever I think about previously to this, I've been in Wichita for about 2.5 years now. So basically my whole time at Wichita Public Schools, which is the largest school district in Kansas, has been about the pandemic. And prior to that, I came from Omaha Public Schools, and they're very much similar in size and in demographics. But the experiences are so different. And whenever I look at what I was able to do in that little over 5 years there, basically was accelerated inside of what we see now in Wichita Public Schools. Very much similar things you hear from everyone else across the country. We handed out devices in a parking lot. You know, we accelerated a 1-to-1. We took a couple year model into a couple month model of a 1-to-1. And so now we're backfilling the supports that were needed for that. And whenever I think about this old century model, our old processes can't be the same. And that's one of the things that I love about Verizon Innovative Learning is it creates the systems. I'd say more than the devices and the internet, it's the systems that create the supports that are needed for a 1-to-1 environment. I sit on National Future Ready as a Future Ready advisor. And, you know, one of the key things that I know my friend Joe Sanfilippo says is when in the absence of knowledge, people make up their own. And it's true. If you don't understand what that why is and what that story is, then our staff, our students, and our community, they have to assume. And many times those assumptions aren't right. And when you're looking at a situation like we're in, where you have an influx of money and you have a way to transform that, you know, I think if we stay behind, you know, it's easier to hide in the rise of the mists of uncertainty. And we live in an uncertainty today. And it's easy for us as technology leaders to sometimes hide behind that technology. And I say, one of the things we need to do more and more, especially in public education, is We need to tell our story. And when you recognize that we get so caught up in the busyness of things. I mean, I'm having a snow day today because we're like 7 inches of snow on the ground, and it's cold here in Wichita. It's blowing. And whenever I think about what we could be doing today, it is very much different than I would have thought 20 years ago, whenever I came into education. Our kids have access. We have the availability to deliver content like we've never seen before. Whenever I look at, what we have to do in education, it's all built on trust. Trust is the foundation of every interaction that we have, and it dictates the speed of which the progress of our classrooms, our districts, or schools make. I think our leadership works at the speed of trust. I think our collaboration works at the speed of trust. I think even our transformation works at that speed of trust. And when we shifted to a remote learning environment last year, as William talked about, in January of that year, we averaged 450,000 Microsoft Teams calls a day. And when I think about what we had to do in order to support the classroom then, I don't want us to think about it being a negative experience, because I think whenever we come to whatever normal this is going to come out to be, I don't think we'll ever go back to what it was, right? Because all of us have access. And whenever I think about the systems that Verizon Innovative Learning put in place, it's more for me to replicate those processes across all the other schools that are not Vills. Let me give you an example. Diane talked about our tech teams, and I posted a couple graphics in there about those student tech teams. We've built out those middle school student tech teams to flow through pathways at our high schools, because one of the things that I have to be able to support is technology support that wasn't in a one-to-one environment before. And in over 90 schools and programs, if we've expanded that one-to-one to the entire district, I've got to be able to build those supports quick. And so what we did was partner with WSU Tech and WSU to build a program in applied learning to where students can flow into a pathway. And we currently have around 7 FTE of those students, which ends up being maybe about 14, 15 students. They do tech work in our buildings, and they get high school credit, college credit, and they get paid $15 an hour to do that work. And so whenever I think about, for me, it solves a problem. It solves the problem of I need a workforce to be able to do the work, and I need to be able to do that in sustainability. What I think Vills does for me is it's that exploratory phase at the middle school level. Those are lost kids, right? You think of any other time in history as a child, the transition from elementary to middle school is the hardest one. And you think about where our kids are at with social media, they're exposed to a giant circle of influence that we growing up never had to deal with. And so this allows those kids to do work and see reward for the work that they do, and find a pathway for where they want to be. The other pieces that I think are great about Vills is the professional development, those buckets. Whenever I look at National Future Ready, you can see all those 7 gears and collective leadership there. But I think one of the great things about Vills, it fits all of those gears very, very well. And I'll post a link in of our technology plan that's built around National Future Ready that you all can take a look at. But I think one of the things important for this phase is to recognize how to communicate and communicate and communicate, because those pieces that are inside of, whether it be those student tech teams, whether it be that professional development, those Verizon Innovative Learning coaches, we have great portfolios. And Jill, if you can post those link of those portfolios that we have into the chat. One of the things great about Vills is you have to create a portfolio for your school in year 1, year 2, and year 3. And this helps build a story for your parents, your staff, your students, and your community about the transformation happening in education today. Because I think in any other time in history, this is the time that we're feeling squeezed, because as a society, things are changing. And as you look at education, we have an opportunity to kind of change things up. it's important to not think about those old processes and get caught up in those traditions. I think it's a great time to think about first principles and think about how learning happens, because we have a set of tools today and a set of processes and systems that we've never had before in education systemically, because people were forced to do that. You look at our workforce today, it's the widest workforce we've ever had. People don't retire like they used to, and people are still coming in, and we have a gap in teacher needs. This is a time for education to innovate, and I think the systems that our VILS program, which I have 12 VILS schools in Wichita. I had 2 in Omaha in cohort 5. So I was involved in cohort 5 and cohort 8. Seeing the dynamics and changing as VILS evolves helps me as a leader to grab those processes and reinvent them in our non-VILS schools to make sure they're all successful.
Thank you, Rob. I guess the burning question that I have in my mind, and then we'll open it up to anyone else that may have questions, is do you think you speak a lot about VILS, and this is really a presentation about capturing value of investment at the highest level, at all levels within our school systems. So do you find that you're able to use some of those same processes that you used in VILS in other projects, like projects that might upgrade student information systems or single sign-on systems or any other type of systems? Can you take those processes and duplicate them into other business and educational entities?
Absolutely. I think what's great about this is there's a scaffolding effect, right? Anytime, whether it be you're in a large district or a small district, systems need to have the supports behind them, the right supports. And I think identifying those right supports to make sure an initiative, and sometimes it's even identifying the initiatives, right, that we need to prioritize, because I think in education, we love to be initiative based, and it's finding out what's the most important initiatives and what supports can we put behind those to make sure that those are successful. And when you look at, some of the systems and how you do a school transformation, which is the key piece about Verizon Innovative Learning, taking that type of scaffold effect across multiple years. And that's through professional development, it's through those resources. Not everything is brought to the surface at once. It's done in a very organized and timely way that user adoption becomes much higher. Think about this, even a key piece of VILS, they don't recommend that you hand out devices day one. What do we want to do in remote learning? We want to hand out devices day one. I think in a regular environment, you want to give some taking food the same way that you ordered food before. You don't order transportation service the way you ordered transportation service before. I don't wake up with an alarm clock. This thing does so many things different, and it augments my experience with my community, with my social connections, which are worldwide. I even see some of those social connections in this chat feed here. So I think about our students' connections, which conversations are different now. We talk in mediums, and there's multi-mediums there to help students express themselves, or even us express ourselves in communication. Digital literacy and citizenship are key to help us doing that in a thoughtful manner.
You sure have given us a lot to think about, and we appreciate you so much, and thanks to all the panelists. So now we're ready to open up some questions. I think before we do that, we do have, so that we can just finish out the rest of our time with questions, just some quick announcements with some coursework that's coming up that COSN is offering. We're having a project management facilitated course in the spring. You can find that information at this link, also on the website. We're also offering the CETL Foundation facilitated course, and a lot of the smart IT, a lot of the cost benefit analysis, return on investment, total cost of ownership, so those things are covered in the course. So if any of those things sound foreign to you, that would be a good opportunity to consider taking the CETL course. And then we've talked a lot about trust and what that really means and building a trusted learning environment. We have a workshop coming up in April, and then cybersecurity. There's a facilitated course, and then a couple of other webinars and workshops related to figuring out how to budget for cybersecurity, and also planning and running tabletop exercises. And then, of course, we have our conference coming up in Nashville in April. That's the COSIN 2022 conference. And we also want to thank our sponsors, and we have a lot of great sponsors. We could not do the work that we do without our sponsors. So thank you so much for your support. So let's go back to questions and open up the chat. Hopefully you've had a moment to think about what your questions might be, and we'll take those questions now. Jill, do you want to facilitate those questions that might be from a Q&A or from the chat?
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, please put your questions in the chat and we will have the panel respond to them.
Okay.
I don't see any yet. So if you have any questions that you're thinking of, Frankie, go ahead while we're waiting.
There was a lot of information that we discussed and a lot of great examples. I can't wait to look at that template that you put out there, Diane, and some of your examples, Rob. I think that's going to be so worthwhile, and we'll provide some tools that we can use immediately. I think I'll stop sharing.
Well, I have a question regarding, and Frankie kind of touched on it, you know, Rob, I think in a past presentation, you said, hey, the best thing about sustainability is when you can take a practice and put in other schools so that it's scalable. Do you have examples of that, William or Rob, regarding things that you helped build a system around and then you plopped into maybe your high schools or your elementary schools or other middle schools that were not Vills?
You know, I'm doing the same structures inside of our two K-8 schools that are non-Ville schools in there. We're restructuring our STS model and even the support model around those schools. Actually, within the next couple of weeks, we're looking at redoing the support model even inside of Southeast High School. And as I would say, it's not changing the entire system, but as the system evolves and people leave or positions change, it's an opportunity to get in there and start to change the process and change the people, because you know, we all we're a people organization, and I think, you know, it evolves at the change of that trust, right? Going at the speed of trust.
Yeah, we have certainly been able to do that. We've had the pleasure of being in the Verizon Innovative Learning Program for a couple of years now, since 2018. So pre-pandemic, and then obviously everything's been heightened in terms of or the microscope placed on technology over the past 2-3 years. So we have definitely made that a priority. This past year, we launched what is called the Digital Transformation Handbook. And blueprint for all schools in our district. So we have 24 schools within some aspect of the Vills program, but we have 170 schools overall. So what can we do to kind of share that out and build in those systems? So over the past year, we've really worked to set up student tech teams and loaner systems and day users and things that put the access first, because we know that, you know, kind of in your greater sense of Maslow's hierarchy of need, in order for digital instruction or any of those other things to occur, the devices and those systems have to be in place first that ensures access is guaranteed. So that's really where we've started. And then we're working on our digital curriculum aspects, digital citizenship, district-wide curriculums and programs to help facilitate that as kind of a wraparound support. So yes, we're definitely looking for the scalability of that, again, across all 100,000 students. And the real notion of that is we want to be a school district rather than a district of schools. We want every school to be the same for the student, regardless of where they go, at least in terms of technology access.
Okay.
Thanks, you two.
We got a couple of great questions. The first is, when it comes to budget cuts and using this data, what are your experiences and where to cut first? I think we'd all love to answer that question. Who wants to go first?
I mean, I would tell you, having gone through Kansas, and we had a certain governor, Governor Brownback, who loved to cut education. I've kind of been through this cycle before. When you look at those buckets, like if I were to look at the National Future Ready gears, those 7 gears, many times the first one we take is professional learning. And I would say it seems to be an easy one, because it's one that when you take away from, you won't feel the effects of it for a couple years. In fact, because of retention, right? Learning is transforming experiences in long-term memory. It's storing that experience over time, and it's retrieving that experience. However, I will say this: when you don't remove evenly, your outcome doesn't happen. And there's a change graph that I would usually post up there. I just don't have it on hand right now, but you'll start to see pieces of things start to fail. And I would just say that I would take it evenly across the board as much as possible, so that your supports still stay there for the things that are worth the most to the organization.
And maybe you'd go back to again, like we talked about earlier, to the school system strategic plan, to the goals that the district is trying to achieve. So,
yeah, and that Frankie, that's exactly what I was going to say. Obviously, that's very difficult to kind of quantify, because every school district is going to be different. Mm-hmm. Rob is 100% right that usually it's professional learning that is cut first, and because I think that is kind of the easy way out. Oh, they'll figure it out on their own. There's enough whatever out there. And as he said, the effects are not seen for a couple of years down the line. So I think that's really where the prioritization comes in that we spoke to earlier, of really, how does it align with your overall goal, and how does it align with where you're trying to get to in that overall project plan? Much like Rob, we've had $5.3 million cut out of Kentucky funding over the past couple of years. So we're very much in the same boat. And that's just where, again, you look at exactly this discussion. What is the value of these investments that we're making? And how do we determine the prioritization? What is working versus where is that waste that we can potentially cut from to continue to innovate and push forward?
That's a great answer. Thank you. Well, we have time for probably one more question. We got about 3 minutes left. I want to honor everyone's time. The next one is coincidentally about prioritization. And it's really about, how do we prioritize and build in sustainability for these innovative systems when we know funding and resources are going to come to an end? All of a sudden I look to Diane, because Diane, you've done that fabulous technology sustainability toolkit. So who would like to answer?
Well, I did say in the chat and also in the toolkit, find out the assets you have right now. That's a big thing, so that you have a grip on when stuff is going to start conking out on you. So when you need to replace and what. I mean, always assets first. Find out what that value is, but then build behind the scenes. Like I said, your data sets regarding, do you have things that show how often stuff is being used? I even know with interactive whiteboards now, they've got like a console that you can check to find out how long some of these items have been used. And so that data is going to help you as you get to the point where you have to make tough decisions. And so I think that if people invest in that stuff now, they're really going to be grateful 3 years from now when the decisions become really tough, because at least they'll have some data to help back them up. William and Rob, I'm interested in your thoughts as well.
Well, Diane, I think you're 100% right. It's obviously we want to see what's being used and what data is available, both quantitative and qualitative, because again, they both very much matter. Because some things won't show up on a quantitative, but are truly making an impact. I think the big part of that is not only sustainability, but that's where you really start talking about replacement cycles and refreshment cycles, because we got this, all school districts got that large sum of money and we know it's going to go away. So how do we sustain after that? And what does that look like? So it might be a reprioritization of finances, but it also might be, okay, can we break this big piece down into smaller chunks and set up a path forward to ensure that that access is always there? And I think that's really the part that we are now working on as a district. So we now provide all of our schools 25% of their enrollment in devices every year to ensure that they have that sustainability plan and moving forward. And we're working on a 4 to 5 year replacement cycle. So they're 100% connected at all times.
Anything else, Rob?
No, I think William hit that on the tee.
Well, just in closing, Diane, back to your the toolkit that you so eloquently laid out is, you talk about keeping the sustainability initiatives current and in front of your team, your leadership team, and your board of education. And so I think that's so important. And that this VOI analysis, I think, lends itself to keeping it fresh and keeping it current. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Diane and William and Rob. Thank you, Jill. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you.